Cilluffo is a CBSN security analyst and director for the Cyber and Homeland Security Center at George Washington University. He joins us now on the phone to talk about all of this. Frank, we have this individual originally from Uzbekistan, came to the U.S. in 2010, recently rented this U-Haul truck, and according to police, is the man behind this terror attack, intentionally driving his vehicle on a popular bike and pathway on Halloween. Just with those initial details, what does all of that tell you?
You know, I mean, sadly, it's a tactic we're seeing more and more throughout the world, using vehicles as a weapon and vehicular ramming. It is a tactic that's been around for a while, but it became much more popular back in 2010 when Al-Qaeda and the Arabian Peninsula put a call out in its magazine at the time, Inspire, asking individuals to use trucks and vehicles to mow people down. Sadly, it's been reinforced and reiterated by ISIS. In its magazine, Rumia, it even provided details on how to maximize the death and the carnage of these sorts of attacks. And often it's been said that terrorists are imitators, not innovators. I think in some cases they are innovative, but clearly we are seeing a lot of copycats and imitating in terms of this particular tactic. Now,
well, Frank, let me just ask, based on what you've just said, the fact that this has been a go-to tactic for those trying to inflict terror, it's becoming increasingly popular, and here we are seeing it in Manhattan on Halloween. What, if anything, can law enforcement do, can major cities do to protect against truck attacks? Previous analysts have said to us it's just not financially feasible.
You know, it is very difficult. For special events, there are certain things you can do to limit ingress, egress, and access to large crowds. Increasingly, you see major potential targets, iconic targets, are using bollards to protect themselves. But it's very difficult to be able to protect everything everywhere all the time, and it's quite costly. What makes this tactic so challenging and vexing is that it allows for attacks by terrorists with minimal training, and pretty much anyone can access a vehicle and unfortunately cause carnage. So it all comes back to, and it's not to be hackneyed, but at the end of the day, intelligence, getting left of boom, trying to prevent and preempt incidents long before they're in the action phase is the name of the game here.
Now, unlike other attacks we've seen, the suspect here, Cilluffo Saipov, is alive, is in custody, was not killed, even though he had weapons in his possession, a paint gun and a pellet gun. How, at this stage, do the law enforcement officials convince him to tell them why he did this and to connect the dots and to essentially give up the information which incriminates him? How does one convince a suspect to do that at a stage like this?
You know, in some cases they actually want to blab. They're quite twistedly proud of their activity. In other cases, it's obviously much more difficult to glean intelligence and information. I mean, what they're looking for right now is whether or not he was part of a broader or wider plot, whether he had any accomplices or associates, or whether he was genuinely a homegrown, inspired jihadist, or in this case, I don't know if he's a citizen or not. But those are the sorts of questions: who rented the truck? Who is he listening to, and who, if he had any sorts of accomplices, to actually generate that information. I mean, NYPD is the best in the business. Obviously, the Federal Bureau of Investigation will be part of that. And I mean, if there were one area, the lower Manhattan area in particular is a hot spot in terms of some of the most sophisticated, not only law enforcement capabilities, but also technologies, to see if there were anything that could be gleaned in advance of that. So, I mean, each case is unique. But if there's a group that's well versed and trained in terms of gathering that sort of information, you can bet that that's in New York right now. The Joint Terrorism Task Force there, which is a combination of FBI and NYPD, is among the very best in the world.
Now, this incident took place at roughly 3 p.m. Eastern, and by the 5 p.m. or 5:15 p.m. press conference, Governor Cuomo had already characterized this as a lone wolf attack. How would they know that so early in the investigation? Is that a hint that perhaps they know more than what they're sharing?
You know, I'm not sure if he was speaking too quickly. I mean, often we find out information well after an event or an incident that may question some of the early suggestions people make. I think here what you're seeing, though, is, and again, these are not telltale indicators, but the fact that he was using I think it was paintball guns and maybe a pellet gun demonstrates that he likely didn't have a much broader network that he was working with. But I think it is early to tell. And I mean, wolves, the lone wolf concept, I question sometimes its underpinning assumptions, because there are acts of genuine lone wolves, but in many cases it's friends and it's colleagues, and who are they really listening to and inspired by? And I think that it's early to tell, but perhaps the governor has some hard information, and obviously does to one extent or another that the rest of us are unaware of at this stage. And
what do you make of the attack overall? Some of it appeared thought out, a rented vehicle, picking a time and location, Halloween, a busy area of Lower Manhattan, but then to get out of a vehicle with a pellet gun, a paintball gun, and in the video that we see from eyewitnesses, he then appears to kind of be staggering around in the streets of New York, not really having any clear direction of where he's going. Some of it appears planned and predicted, and some of it appears, unexpected. What do those details tell you?
You know, Errol, that's a great question, and we've seen that in the past where they're thinking through the immediacy of the attack in terms of trying to maximize impact and deaths and destruction and the like, but in many cases they're not thinking through exit plans. They're not thinking through next phase. So, I mean, in this case, it does sort of smell as if this is someone who's inspired ideologically by ISIS and some of their views. But unfortunately, we've seen cases in the past where they're not thinking through all the levels and phases of the attack. So time will tell. But I would agree with you that clearly he had thought through and planned out the attack, but obviously not necessarily all the different steps and phases. So
yeah, we are certainly very early in the investigative phase of this attack. Frank Cilluffo, a CBSN security analyst, joining us on the phone there from Virginia. We appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you, Al. Appreciate it.